Welcome to the Well Woman Show, where we interview women executives, leaders, and entrepreneurs.
And you're listening to the Well Woman Show,
where motivated women achieve fulfillment and well-being.
You're listening to the Well Woman Show.
Take time for myself by coming to things like Well Woman Drinks.
To be accepting of myself no matter what. Step away from judgment as much as possible.
You're listening to the Well Woman Show.
You're going to be in for a good ride. I don't regret anything. Everything I've ever done, I've learned from it, one way or another, good or bad.
Being a little bit selfish for yourself, put your own oxygen mask on first and then give what's left.
I'm a woman. I would prefer to tell my own story. My story, though it's very personal, is universal.
You're listening to the Well Woman Show. And now your host, Giovanna Rossi.
Hi, Giovanna Rossi here, and welcome to another episode of the Well Woman Show, where I interview women leaders, executives, and entrepreneurs about their lives and their road to becoming and being who they are today. Do you ever find yourself overwhelmed with your responsibilities, and it seems like you'll never get it all done? Well, you're not alone. We all need to remember to use our superpowers, the ones we already have but don't use all the time, and take advice and wisdom from one another. Towards the end of the show, in a segment called Superpowers for Success, I ask my guest about her superpowers, and the answers will give you the strength, perspective, and power to keep on being the well woman you are. I'm so happy you're here, so thanks for tuning in. The Well Woman Show is sponsored by Better Money Decisions, headed by two awesome women, Kate and Lorraine, who put your interests first when it comes to your money. They make sure your plan and your investments are tailored just for you. No financial jargon, no Wall Street double talk. Go to bettermoneydecisions.com/wellwoman to get their new book for free. Today's topic is how to overcome your fears and become a leader in your field. And hopefully by the end of the show, you'll be inspired to understand and create your own leadership style. Have the knowledge and power to connect to leaders and mentors who can help you and use your experience to support and encourage other women. My guest today is Dr. Christina Salas, an engineer and assistant professor in orthopedics at the University of New Mexico. In this episode, Dr. Salas and I talk about how New Mexico is leading in the field of orthopedics and engineering, how she overcame agoraphobia, and why it's important to delegate in order to find balance between work and home life. Talking about her interdisciplinary team at UNM, Dr. Christina Salas says she's been trying to bridge the gap between engineering and healthcare and does a lot of outreach to encourage girls to pursue careers in engineering and medicine. The free giveaway today is the free Crafting Your Leadership Identity worksheet. I love this giveaway because it's a quick guide to understanding and creating your own leadership. Download it for free at wellwomanlife.com/068show. Now to my interview with Dr. Christina Salas. I'm speaking with Dr. Christina Salas today. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Christina, can you start by telling our listeners, what are you working on and how does it impact women's lives?
Okay. Well, I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Orthopedics at the University of New Mexico. I'm an engineer. I was trained in both mechanical and biomedical engineering, and so my research lab is actually very diverse. We work on primarily orthopedics-focused research projects, anything from designing new orthopedic implants to helping develop new surgical procedures. Right now, we're doing some exciting work with Carrie Tingley Children's Hospital, focused on looking at 3D printing of prosthetics for low-cost prosthetic options for children. And we're also working on a very large-scale 3D bioprinter and electrospinner project, which basically what that does is it will help us 3D print biological tissue, bone, ligament, tendon, pretty much you name it, organs eventually. And the idea is that that's something that can be used here directly in our clinic and directly in our operating rooms to help the patients and citizens of Albuquerque, state of New Mexico. Actually, we're our level 1 trauma center, so we do treat people from all over the state. And the idea is that we could use the skills that we've learned and the things that we can bring from engineering to help our orthopedic surgeons basically improve healthcare. So.
Okay, and when you say printer, I actually saw the printer in your lab, and it's amazing, and we'll put a photo of it on the website with the show. But when you say printer, to me, it's it doesn't look like a printer. It looks like you're creating these tissues and things. So can you talk about why do you call it a printer?
Sure. Okay, so it functions very much like a regular inkjet printer that you're probably familiar with, where you put a little printer cartridge and that cartridge has ink in it, and then you upload some sort of file, and it directs the printer to reproduce what you have on your computer. So this is called a printer because it works in the same way. So you have an interface; it's a computer interface, and you tell it that you want to build some three-dimensional object, and it'll send the signal to the printer. But unlike a standard inkjet printer, the bio ink is what we call it, are basically biological materials that are then ejected through a syringe, a standard syringe that you would see in the hospital. And the computer tells it in what design you wish to print. And so, for instance, if we wanted to replace a piece of bone, we could say, okay, this is the shape of the defect in the bone that we want to replace. We give it that design, and then it prints it in exactly that same three-dimensional configuration. And then ultimately, you would seed it with cells that you could get from a patient. Let's say a patient who had the patient whose bone you were trying to replace, you could get their cells, you could seed the cells on top of it, and eventually you would regrow a patient's own tissue from their own cells in the same configuration that you wish to fill, like that gap that you're looking to fill.
Okay, great explanation. And I understand that this is a one-of-a-kind printer and project, really, in the whole country. So you're a real leader in this area. Can you talk about that and how you were able to bring this project to the University of New Mexico and to Albuquerque?
Absolutely. So I've been working with the Department of Orthopedics for about 10 years now. I myself was a student at the University of New Mexico. I completed my master's and PhDs here. And I've been attempting to bridge that gap between the School of Engineering and the School of Medicine for the entire 10 years. And fortunately, with my relationship with orthopedics, it's been very easy to do that. And because I've maintained that line of communication with engineering, I have a lot of students from all over the School of Engineering, subspecialties like electrical, computer, mechanical engineering, who are interested in working in healthcare. And so with those resources, they come over to this side of campus and essentially just say, hey, this is a challenge. This is a problem that we need to solve in healthcare. And let's think of ways we can all work together as an interdisciplinary team of researchers to make that happen. And so I think my biggest resource is the student assistance and the collaborative effort that we have here at the University of New Mexico.
Okay, so that's your biggest resource, but you are also a resource to them, to students, and to other people. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. So I serve as a graduate advisor and undergraduate advisor to students on main campus. On this side of campus, one of my primary responsibilities is to help graduate students in the graduate medical education program here in orthopedics, and I also mentor undergraduate medical students on this side. I also do a variety of outreach activities. I think this month, the last 2 months alone, we must have gone to about 5 different schools to reach out to them, to encourage them to pursue careers in engineering and or medicine. I also host an outreach event every year called the Perry Initiative Outreach Program, where we bring approximately 40 girls from across the state of New Mexico to spend a day with us performing mock surgery. So they basically get dressed up in scrubs, and they spend the entire day with female surgeons and female engineers. And we have simulated bone, but real implants, real orthopedic implants and instruments. And they have modules, so they'll repair a broken bone in the leg, like the femur. They learn how to repair tendons. They learn how to repair a broken knee. And then we also perform little activities with them so that they can see how engineering and orthopedics kind of work together to do things like develop these new implants and, essentially work together to improve healthcare in ways that I think is kind of unique. I've traveled quite a bit. I've lived in a number of different places, and I've done two fellowships that were NSF-funded fellowships, one at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota and one in UC San Francisco. And working in those labs, it's interesting to see how UNM has been able to achieve, if not better, then at least as good of a relationship between engineering and orthopedics to really push healthcare forward in orthopedics.
Okay, well, that's really interesting. Also, I want to just go back to the outreach that you do and the work with younger people, both boys and girls, but specifically the program where you bring the 40 girls in, because we see that engineering is still male dominated. So bringing girls in at an early age really makes a big difference for them to have a role model and to see you and other women in the field. And then that might also be the same in orthopedics. I'm not sure. Yeah, you're nodding yes. So, but then bringing them together is really innovative and exciting. So the girls get to experience both of those together in that program?
Exactly. Yes. So, I was actually fortunate myself. So the internship that I did at UC San Francisco, when I was there, I actually worked with the national directors of this program. And at the time, I actually helped them develop that program specifically for female students within San Francisco Bay Area. One's an engineer, one's an orthopedic surgeon, and both females. And they said these two fields are highly male dominated, especially in orthopedics or in medical school. If you notice, usually by the time a student comes to medical school, they've already decided what specialty they want to go into. When a student goes into college, they might choose engineering, but a female student might be more drawn to maybe computer engineering or electrical engineering and not so much mechanical engineering or civil engineering. And so they decided that this is something that we needed to address. And so it's what started as just a small program in the San Francisco Bay Area. Chevron became interested in it, and they got a few other big name companies who were interested in it. It became a national program. And as soon as I went from a student to a faculty, actually even before I was a faculty member, I said, it's now become a national program. We should be a satellite site for this. And here in Albuquerque, I mean, no different than any place else, both engineering and orthopedics in their both programs, you'll see, a small fraction of female graduates within each of those programs. And so we're hoping with the Perry Initiative to really address that disparity.
Okay, well, we'll definitely link to that on the website so that people can learn more about what you're doing and your outreach activities. What other kinds of resources have you found to be important in your field, and particularly for women going into the sciences?
So there are a lot of national programs like the Society of Women Engineers that really reaches out to females who start in the engineering program, as freshmen and sophomores, and encourage them to stay with the program, matriculate through the entire 4-year, maybe 5-year undergraduate degree program. They have similar programs here on this side of campus for medical students. We also try, in addition to the Perry Initiative, we also try to reach out locally to high schools. So we work with science teachers. I have a team of researchers here within the Department of Orthopedics. Not all engineers. There's some English majors, some business major. And the reason we do that is because we want to basically show that you don't necessarily need to be an engineer or a doctor to have an impact in healthcare. And so, the person with an MBA, she does our, research management and budgeting and things like that are really important. So we travel to these schools and we introduce ourselves, our research team, some of the things that we do, and how interdisciplinary our program is, and just try to reach out to all students, females in particular, and say, hey, it doesn't necessarily matter what you choose to do, to study when you're done with your high school degree, but please think of healthcare and engineering as an option, and just kind of reach out to them in that way.
And are there other resources?
Absolutely. So there's a new NSF-funded program called the Women in STEM on main campus, and they're reaching out to currently female faculty members, but also students within the engineering, sciences, architecture programs, to just provide them the support that might be needed, any additional support. I mean, as a whole person, yes, you have your schooling. That's really important. You might need to maintain a part-time job while in school. You might have a family, children, and so forth. And sometimes, especially with females, there are a lot of other things that kind of play a role in why you may or may not finish your 4-year degree. And so I think that the programs like Women in STEM and STEAM-H and a few others that we have on main campus really are trying to address that early on, so that you feel supported as you're going through your degree program, and hopefully you complete that degree. Yeah.
That's really important, to consider all the different aspects of women's lives. And that's a lot of what we talk about on the Well Woman Show is the whole woman. And so on that note, that's a good segue to ask you a little bit more about your personal background. Did you always know, Christina, that you would end up being an engineer and running one of the most innovative programs in your field in the country?
Actually, I did not. But early on, I'd say my mom, actually just this weekend, she was telling the story that from the time I was probably in 5th grade, I said I wanted to be an engineer. And, I used to think engineers drove trains, and I had a teacher in elementary school that realized that I was really fascinated with women like Sally Ride and some of the early female pioneers in aerospace and engineering. And she said, you should maybe think about engineering. And then, I went through middle school and even high school, and I pretty much really forgot about it, but I always loved to tinker with things. Like I had children's encyclopedias where, I would just spend the day saying, oh, look, I can build this with, any miscellaneous things I have around the house. And then I realized, hey, this is actually engineering, once I started considering college and what I wanted to do. And unfortunately, I didn't have a lot of additional mentors in middle and high school. So I by the time I got to college, I did apply for engineering, and I got into an engineering program. But I started in computer engineering, and then I transitioned to electrical engineering, and then I moved to California, and I started in a program. This is all while I was still an undergrad. I started in a program in mechatronic engineering, which is electrical and mechanical engineering combined. And then I realized I love mechanical engineering, so I dropped that, and I ultimately got my bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering. And from there, I moved here to Albuquerque, and I started my graduate degree in mechanical engineering, and I was introduced to orthopedics. And once I realized that engineering and medicine could come together in such a way, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an engineer that really helped develop products, devices, and basically innovate things in the medical field. Yeah, so it was kind of a long path, but I knew that I wanted to be an engineer, but I didn't know how to get there until I was in college. So
yeah, and you didn't know how it was going to interface with health.
Exactly, not at all. Yeah, I didn't even biomedical engineering was a relatively new field around the time that I started college. There were a few programs across the country, but most people were in the core engineering fields like mechanical, electrical, and computer and so forth. And it wasn't until I saw that application of mechanical engineering in medicine that I thought that's a perfect, pairing right there. Mm-hmm.
And do you have mentors now, being a leader and a mentor yourself? Do you still rely on mentors in your own life?
I do. So while I didn't have, other than my elementary school mentor, while I didn't have any in middle and junior high, I met a lot of females in engineering and in orthopedics once I started college. And I have Dr. Deanna Mercer here, who is our current research director. Her and I have actually been working together the entire 10 years that I've been here. While I was a student, she was actually a medical resident here in orthopedics. And so we finished our degrees almost exactly at the same time. She went off and did a medical fellowship, and I went off and did my engineering fellowships. And we both came back here and became faculty members. And both of us together run the research program here within the department. And then Dr. Jenny Buckley, who I briefly mentioned earlier, not by name, but she's the engineer that worked at University of California, San Francisco, that I went to her when I finished my master's degree before I started the PhD, and I was ready to stop at a master's degree when I went to her lab. And then she just kind of opened my eyes to, you're a great mentor. You can really share a lot with others. You're a great teacher. You should consider a PhD and you should consider working in academia. And actually it was because of her that I came back here to pursue the PhD in biomedical engineering.
A lot of times women need to be asked to do things. That's certainly true in politics and really in business too. A lot of times, and in our professions, we don't think we can do something until someone else says, you should do that. You'd be really good at that. And sort of gives you that permission. Do you feel like that's partly what happened with you?
Absolutely. So, it's difficult being a minority in a lot of senses. So, in the engineering program, as I mentioned, very few females. I graduated with one other female in my undergraduate degree program in mechanical engineering. And what I found, both my experiences and now seeing other females kind of go through similar programs and face similar issues, it's very difficult to empower women in these male-dominated fields, especially in those like mechanical engineering and orthopedics, which traditionally, when you're younger, you say, if you're going to be a mechanical engineer, you're going to be an orthopedic surgeon, you need to be strong, you need to have, you need to have a lot of strength to be able to place those implants and to build that big, heavy device. And in reality, it's all about skill and not necessarily strength. And so, with the Perry Initiative, as I mentioned, the reason we design it to where it's just 40 females is because usually when 40 females are in a room together, they tend to empower one another. Occasionally, when we have programs where there are males involved in the same activity, the females tend to drop back. Physically drop back in the room. The male will step up physically, they literally step up to do the activity, and either the females need to interject and say, no, I want to do that, or someone has to invite them in. And so, we very specifically host these types of programs so that we can make sure that everyone feels comfortable engaging in whatever activity we're doing, and hopefully feel empowered and feel like, hey, I may not have ever held a drill before in my life, but I can use one now, and it's not that difficult, and I can do amazing things with this. And so, yeah.
Christina, how would you describe your leadership style? And is it different from some of your colleagues and other people in your profession?
So my leadership style tends to be one in which the students that I work with and collaborate with and mentor, I feel strong in their abilities to perform whatever task I've assigned. So I tend to, I meet weekly, more than weekly, depending on the projects that we're working on. And I'll typically assign activities, and then I rely on them to check in with me and say, hey, I've hit this issue that I need a little bit more guidance on. Can you work with me to work through it? And then we'll meet and we'll kind of figure things out. And assuming that there are no bumps in the road, we check in, and we just continue checking in throughout the course. They develop timelines for completion of their research projects, and if they fall off that timeline, then we definitely sit down and say, hey, we need to figure out exactly what's going on either in your school life or your personal life that might have thrown you a little bit off track, and let's figure out a way to come back so that we still meet this. We know that there's a defined graduation point or a defined point in which this project needs to be delivered to whoever's supporting it, and that's typically I don't like to micromanage. I prefer to have people working with me that are fully competent, or at least can be trained to complete their task. And I've been really lucky to have students that have all been very successful. Yeah.
Okay. And then in thinking about your life in Albuquerque, because you're based in Albuquerque, you're a national level researcher and you've got this important program, but you also live your life right here in New Mexico. So can you talk about the kinds of things that that support you to be your best self and be able to do everything that you do? And I know you have a family and a small child. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So I'm not originally from Albuquerque. I'm from San Antonio, Texas. And I moved to Albuquerque now. It's been about 10 years. I started my master's degree, then PhD, and now working as a faculty member. And I met my partner, Tabitha, 8 years ago now. And we've been married for 3, and we have a 3-year-old little girl. And so I spend a lot of my time that's outside of work. I do work quite a bit, nights, weekends, you name it. But when I'm not working, I'm usually spending time with them. Tabitha owns a small business and sells at the farmer's market on Saturday mornings. And so it's so nice to go down to our local farmer's market downtown and just kind of spend the day there. Helping with her business, but really just relaxing in the park with friends and family. I don't have a lot of family here, but fortunately with those connections at the farmer's market and here at work, I have a lot of friends, and Tabitha has a very big family here. So that's really where I get most of my support.
And Christina, when you talk about spending time at the farmer's market and with your family, what other kinds of activities, like what's your favorite sort of family activity in Albuquerque? And what are the kinds of things that you like to do here that really feed you, like feed your soul so that you can do all of this other stuff that you do in your life?
Sure. So I think the biggest family activity we do is go camping. We don't particularly do that in Albuquerque, but the nice thing about being in Albuquerque is that we're so close. It's interesting to be technically in a desert, but you can drive, 45 minutes and be in the mountains. And so we go camping, hiking, anytime possible, just reach out with friends from neighboring states or neighboring cities and travel. We travel a lot inside and outside of the state. So I'd say that's probably the number one thing that we do, as many outdoor activities. And then, we have a house that we purchased 3 years ago. And so, really working on that, I think is, I like, because I'm trained to do most of the work that needs to be done, I like to do it all myself. So we're either working on the house or spending time outdoors.
Okay, we're going into a segment I call Superpowers for Success, and I wanted to ask you a few quick questions. Before we get started, a quick word from our sponsor. One of the top issues women tell me they struggle with is finances, which is why I want you to call my friends at Better Money Decisions. The company is owned by women, Lorraine L. and Kate Stalter, and they make sure your plan and your investments are tailored just for you. They're fiduciaries and put your interests first. No financial jargon, no Wall Street double talk. Also, they have a gift for Well Woman Show listeners. Their free book, Don't Let Your Money Kick the Bucket Before You Do. And it's all about the need to manage your money for a long life expectancy. You can download the entire book at bettermoneydecisions.com/wellwoman. And you'll also get a free portfolio diagnostic, so you can tell if your investments are right for you. Just go to bettermoneydecisions.com/wellwoman. The first one is, what does success in life mean for you?
Oh, wow. That's difficult. I feel that I've achieved a lot more than when I was younger. I had these dreams of being successful, but I don't think I had a clear idea of what it meant to be successful, like truly successful, and I think family is really important to me. And so a lot of what I did from the time I graduated high school until I graduated college was really driven by family, my family in Texas, by their support and wanting to make sure that they were happy with all that I accomplished. And I'm the first person in my family to graduate from college, much less go off and get a PhD. And so, my first goal was, I'm going to be that person to graduate from college. And then, I have a lot of nieces and nephews and my brothers and sisters, and I have a very large family. And so I wanted to be an inspiration to them to say, hey, you can leave the state. I mean, literally just about every family member that I have all lives in San Antonio in Texas, and very close by. I mean, within 5-minute drives of one another. And I said, I'm going to leave the city. I'm going to leave the state. I'm going to graduate from college. And so when I did that, I felt highly successful. And then, then I started realizing this is not just for my family. I really feel like I can keep going. And so I got my master's degree and my PhD. And then I realized that because I didn't have a lot of mentors, I could be that mentor for a lot of people. And so I think, while a lot of people in my position, they tend to see success as, you have a lot of publications, you have a lot of grant funding, you have a lot of teaching experience. And while I have all of those things, I think the one thing that really makes me feel successful is how many students I've empowered to go into the fields of engineering and orthopedics and seeing exactly where they have gone with their degrees. So, yeah.
Do you sometimes see some of the girls from your program come back through college? Have you seen that happen?
Oh, yes. So it's a relatively new program. We just hosted our 5th annual event here in Albuquerque. And so most of the students that have, you're talking about the Perry Initiative particularly, yes. So they've finished the program, and we don't have any statistics within Albuquerque. Actually, this year was the first year we collected, we asked them if they didn't mind us reaching out to them to see where they've gone. But the National Perry organization has done some analysis of their prior participants and found that there is something like an 85% rate of participants in the Perry program that have gone into STEM fields. And that's really excellent. So our goal by asking our participants if we can track them is to see what type of impact we're having here in Albuquerque and in the state of New Mexico. Okay, great.
Next thing I want to ask you is, when did you know, Christina, that you were really good at what you do?
Wow, that's tough. I don't know that. I feel like I have a lot of people tell me that I'm really good at what I do. Wow. I don't know. I feel like I'm a pretty humble person, so I don't know if I'll ever feel like I'm really great at what I do. But I don't know. I think that, like I said, it's typically reflected in how the students actually kind of move ahead and do other things. And yes, I've been fortunate to have, some of my work in journals and presented at a lot of conferences and things like that. And I think a lot of that is validation that what I'm doing, I mean, it's all peer reviewed, so I have to be doing something right. But I don't know. I think that the biggest thing is really just, when I'm done and at the end of my career, looking back and see how many people I've helped. I think that will mean more to me than how many publications I have or how much grant funding I got.
Okay. And can you describe one personal habit that contributes to your well-being?
Oh.
I know that it takes a lot to do what you do. You work a lot. You're, the head of this major program, and you probably have to incorporate some of your own personal practices in order to stay healthy and well.
Absolutely. So, yeah. So I think finding a healthy balance between home life and work life is really important. I'd say I was not so great at that in college. I worked all the time and had multiple jobs outside of school. And so when I started in academia, I tried to keep up the same pace and realized that was not going to happen. I'd probably fall apart. And so then when I got married and had a baby, it wasn't just about, needing to do all these amazing things, but I wanted to make sure that I spent time with my family. And so I'd say that's probably one of the things, forcing myself to take the personal time that I need outside of work to make sure that, I'm spending enough time with family. I travel a lot. I travel home to Texas quite often. All of that keeps me balanced. And, I think that's very important.
And when you made that conscious decision and intentionally started taking, like you said, forcing yourself to take that time, did that impact your work, or were you able to somehow figure out for the work to still happen, but you were able to do what you needed to do?
So my graduate advisor on main campus, basically when I was telling him, about a year into my current position, I said I was feeling a little overwhelmed. And he said that it took him some time to realize that it's never going to stop coming. Like the work is never going to stop, being there for you. So you could work twice as much as you're working already, and all you would do is finish things a little faster, but the list would never get any shorter. And so he really was very helpful by saying that. I realized, oh yeah, that's totally true. So if I could do a better job at delegating tasks, certain responsibilities that could be managed remotely, that would be the way to best manage things. And so, like I said, I have quite a number of graduate students, and it's very difficult for me to be in the lab at all times. And so now I have a lab manager that can oversee a lot of the day-to-day activities. So I started being smarter in how I was planning our research projects and meetings and so forth. And I realized that I could still maintain a personal life and, a work life and still be successful in my work life without having to work, till I fell over. So,
right. That's good. So on the Well Woman Show, we talk about having superpowers, which are these sort of things that are not tangible and they're not visible, and we don't always access them. But sometimes when we do, I guess what I want to say is we all have these superpowers. It's just a matter of figuring out what our superpowers are and then accessing them and activating them. So what superpower did you discover you had only to realize it was there all the time?
So when I was younger, I used to be very nervous. I was actually diagnosed with agoraphobia. I had a lot of fears. I was scared to leave my house. I mean, I had some crazy stuff going on when I was younger, and so I learned. I learned to calm myself with a lot of breathing activities, calming things, meditation, and a variety of things like that. And it was something that, because I was quite nervous from a young age, I had a long time to kind of perfect that, internal calming. And so now now I'm very comfortable in my environment most of the time, and when I do tend to get a little nervous or feel overwhelmed, I kind of draw from a lot of what I did when I was younger, which is to really kind of just take a deep breath. Like my mom always says, take a deep breath and calm my mind, calm my body, and then just think about what needs to be done and do it. Because honestly, most of the fears are really they're unnecessary. They're challenges that in that fear I feel like I can't overcome. But if I calm down, then I realize, hey, I've done this 100 times before. It's it's really easy to do. So I don't know. I'd say that really being able to control my anxiety, and overcome that fear of not being able to complete something, and just realize that it can be done and kind of move ahead. Yeah.
Okay, and just a couple more questions. What advice would you give yourself like 10 years ago?
I would say, I think that, I'm really happy with the path that I took. And but at the time, 10 years ago, I felt really lost. And I was always afraid of taking that next step to move ahead. I was afraid to leave the comfort of my family in Texas. I was afraid when after I moved to California, I was afraid that if I didn't go back, I might disconnect entirely from my family and not see them. I would say to myself then to not be afraid to take those steps, because it doesn't matter. Even if the path hadn't gotten me to where I am now, I think that my drive and my ambition would have still led me to a successful place. It might not be exactly where I am now, but I think, the fears were unwarranted, and to just, kind of push those aside and keep moving ahead. And as long as I'm constantly doing what makes me happy and making sure that I make sure to take care of myself along the way, I think that that I shouldn't have been afraid to end up where I am now, or where I might potentially be.
Okay, and Christina, do you identify as a feminist?
I think I do. I do identify as a feminist. I think that in my work life, my political beliefs, my social environment, I think I tend to do my best to empower women in kind of all aspects of my life, and to always make a conscious effort to I guess make sure whatever the issue might be, that there is some aspect of women being included. I don't know. I guess without being specific, it's hard to really describe that. But yes, I'd say I am a feminist. Yeah.
Okay, great. And last question, what are you reading right now? What's on your nightstand?
Oh, wow. I have a lot of books that I haven't been able to get to lately, but I love books by Mary Roach. I first read Stiff, and then I kind of moved on to a variety of, and I have Grunt right now. That's kind of next in line. Actually, I am about 3/4 of the way through Ruth Bader Ginsburg's a book, the RBG. So that's the one that I'm almost done reading and moving on to Grunt. So.
Great. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you, Christina. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you again for having me.
That's it for our show today. I've been speaking with Dr. Christina Salas, an engineer and assistant professor in orthopedics at the University of New Mexico. In this episode, Dr. Salas and I talk about how New Mexico is leading in the field of orthopedics and engineering, how she overcame agoraphobia, and why it's important to find balance between work and home life. You can get the free Crafting Your Leadership Identity worksheet at wellwomanlife.com/068show. Before I sign off, I want to let you know that this year's Well Woman Superpower Retreat will be October 25th to the 27th in New Mexico. So save the date and check out wellwomanlife.com/retreat for more information. Our monthly live event, Well Woman Drinks, brings women together to share our successes and challenges as women leaders, moms, aunts, sisters, and all the other roles we carry. If you'd like to attend a Well Woman Drinks near you, or if there isn't one in your city yet and you'd like to start one, email info@wellwomanlife.com. And definitely check out the schedule of events at wellwomanlife.com/events. because we've got some great stuff coming up. We have the Financial Abundance Workshop on June 14th, sponsored with us by West, one of our fabulous resources in Albuquerque. And go to wellwomanlife.com/events for all of that information. And if you enjoyed the show, please take a moment and subscribe to the show in iTunes. This helps raise visibility, which is super helpful when it comes to producing the show every week. Or you can head to patreon.com/wellwomanshow to support the show with a monthly contribution. You can also continue the conversation in our community group at wellwomanlife.com/Facebook. For feedback, comments, or just to let me know you were listening today, find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at wellwomanlife. I'm Giovanna Rossi for The Well Woman Show. Until next time, have a super powerful week.